You're listening to the Ground Transportation Podcast with Ken Lucci of Driving Transactions and James Blain of PAX Training. Learn how you can build a thriving transportation business with real profits, repeat clients, and enterprise value. And now for your hosts, Ken and James.
Hi, this is Ken Lucci from Driving Transactions, and welcome to another episode of the Ground Transportation Podcast. James Blain, my co-host from PAX, how are you today?
Good. How are you, buddy?
Good. It's been a busy week. I have to give a shout out to NELA, New England Livery Association. Great meeting on Wednesday night. I drove up there with Bentley, and I drove up there, and I spoke a little bit about the workshop we've got coming up. We're doing, I don't know if you knew this, I am doing a workshop on May 14th for NELA on twofold. One is pricing to make maximum profits. We're going to do that session in the morning. And then the afternoon, we're going to do a session selling, how to sell value instead of low price. So we're going to invite reservationists to come into that, but that's going to be a can't miss kind of thing. So
and what date was that? Just so
May,
everybody can mark their calendar.
May 14th.
Okay.
Check out NELA, NELA.org. And we're obviously going to put out an invitation. It is primarily for NELA members. I think there's going to be a fee for anybody who's not a member, but I would tell you, anybody up in the New England area, come on up, and I guarantee you're going to walk out of there with absolutely a vital worksheet on how to price all of your services or any vehicle. And then you're going to walk out of there with outlines and scripting on how to teach your people how to sell value instead of low price, because that's one of my primary concerns. I just see too many people selling low price. But besides, announcing that, NELA had a panel. I was on the panel to talk about insurance costs, and I'm glad we're doing this session today and talking about what you do, because I'm not sure that the operators are grasping the direct correlation, cause and effect.
Yep.
Of the massive increases in insurance and their inability or their lackadaisical approach to managing driver behavior. So a lot of the examples up there, and these were the best insurance guys in the business. I mean, Research Underwriters was up there on the panel with us, and there was a couple of guys who were from underwriting. So there were a lot of examples about telematics. There were a lot of examples about something you deal with, which is distractive driving. And so
topic.
Yeah, I wanted to talk. I mean, what are the elements of distractive driving that your training deals with?
So it's really interesting because we are in a place where, as a society, driving has moved light years ahead. But we're also at a place where human adeptness, right? And I'm trying to be really nice because I wanted to say stupidity here, has dropped light years. So I was lucky enough that my wife's grandpa, he grew up restoring Model A's. And when he died, I inherited all these manuals. And it talks about setting the valve lash and the timing and everything. And I was like, wow, I wonder how this compares to the manual for my wife's car. And I went out, brand new car, pulled the manual out.
Only you.
Do not drink. No, and I'm telling you, right?
Only
do not. Yeah. But my favorite part is I get to today's manual and it says, do not drink the antifreeze. Do not drink this. Do not lick the battery post. Right?
I never knew that you couldn't drink antifreeze.
Right?
I thought it tasted like lemonade.
Who knew? Right? Yeah. Sweet. Don't put it out for dogs. That's how you get rid of a dog. Right? It's sweet taste. But it's funny because it illustrates this point that in society, we've moved from a point where you bought the car, you were expected to work on it, do everything, to now we've got this, hey, don't drink the antifreeze. And so we've seen that what's happened is things have come way forward. There's all these driver aids, there's all these things. But the problem is that in everybody's pocket, there's a $1 billion device, right? There's a whole industry built around absorbing all of your attention, to the point where people actually, if they forget their phone, they will feel ghost buzzes. Mm-hmm. And so we're in this age now where there's so many things vying for our attention. Came up this morning, I was having breakfast with someone, right? Man, it was funny because I'm having breakfast with my stepdaughter and her boyfriend, and guess what they're talking about? Man, we're driving here and there's this 80-year-old woman on her phone and she can't even figure out how to work it, and she's looking down, and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, And you 20-year-olds are what I'm terrified of, because you guys know how to work it and you're posting on Snapchat driving, right? We're in this age where everything is fighting for your attention and everything is trying to distract us. And as a result of that, what we're seeing is all of these safety aids, radar guided cruise, right? Self-adjusting cruise control, lane assist, all these things do a great job of preventing accidents. But we're also in an age where we are seeing more high speed, full force accidents than we ever had before.
Really?
Because if you're looking, well, think about it. You know, you've got a guy who's driving down the highway looking at his phone. By the time he goes to hit the brakes, he's already hit you at 70 miles an hour. He's already ran the red light. And so we're seeing more and more of these accidents where they're full speed, absolutely no reaction whatsoever from the person causing it. And so as a result of that, what's happening? We're seeing cost of everything else has risen. And now you've got these extreme accidents. Now you've got these lawsuits. We've got kind of this perfect storm that is making it more and more dangerous, even if your driver out there isn't the one distracted. We spend a lot of time teaching how to identify other distracted drivers, because guess what? If I stop at a red light, the very first thing I'm looking at is the rear view. Because again, you've got that guy behind you, 45 mile an hour, full speed. If he hits you, it doesn't matter who's at fault.
Well, think about what you just said there, because you know, in the chauffeur space, I think the misnomer is, and the reality is that unfortunately we have drivers that drive one way when the client is in the car, and they drive another way when they're all by themselves, right? But when you have somebody in the back seat, you are literally in charge of that person's life alone.
Life in your hands.
Right. And I was in San Diego, spoke at a 20 group last week, and I took a ride from the airport. Great chauffeur, great company, great chauffeur. And I chalk him up a little bit. It's an employee chauffeur. Okay. So I'm looking at this camera in the car, right? And this person's body, this person's head did not move. In other words, okay, they literally
just straight ahead.
They were straight ahead, and I watched them a little bit look at the mirror. I watched them look at the rear view, and then I watched them look at the side view. But my whole point is, they didn't take a drink of their Big Gulp. They didn't take a look at their phone. They didn't answer. I mean, their phone pinged once, right? They didn't even look at it that way. Okay. Now I'm driving back. The company's picking me up from the hotel, and I'm driving back, right? And the driver is looking at his phone, and the driver is texting. Okay. So I said, let me ask you a question. Are you an employee? Yeah. And he's like, no, you know, we're a vendor for that company. And I could tell the difference. Oh, yeah. I could tell the difference. And that was an IO car. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that.
But
right.
It's normal.
Right. But the difference is the first person was doing their job without me seeing all kinds of gyrations. And they were looking at 9 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and, you know, obviously the rearview mirror. So the distracted driving piece, when you talk about distracted driving, how does the operator manage that chauffeur?
So you got to think of it a little bit like a sports team, right? You're responsible for your players. You're responsible for their thought process. You're responsible for the tone that you set in your own company. And I'm starting here because that's the single most important piece.
Oh, culture of safety.
Culture of safety. Yep. If you don't set the tone, if you don't set zero tolerance, that's huge. Now, I'm going to take us on a little sidebar. I'll bring it back in a second. But one of the big things that happens is operators will try to set that tone, and they'll say, hey, I have a zero tolerance policy for texting and driving. We're just not going to do it. If I catch you doing it, you're fired. Then the best driver gets caught. And it's, man, I can't lose Johnny. Johnny's been with me 10 years. It's the first time we've ever had an issue. And so you decide to keep him. The problem is, if Johnny gets in an accident 6 months later, you're going to have a negligence claim on your hands, because they're going to say, well, you had a policy, and that policy was that if somebody got caught texting and driving, you'd fire them because you were going to keep things safe. But ladies and gentlemen of the jury, how greedy is this man? He decided that money was more important. Why? because he needed that driver on the road. He needed money. Money was more important than my client's ability to walk or whatever they're going to target you on.
Well,
So
the nuclear verdicts is what is killing the industry.
it's absolutely killing it. But that again comes back to, you've got to have that policy. And here's the thing. Once you get that, hey, we've got policies we're going to do, and we got the culture, we got the tone, you've got to understand that in our world, we have an extra piece vying for our attention. One of the things that drives me nuts is, look, we teach eye contact. Eye contact is good. Now, if you've got cultural concerns, someone coming in from overseas, you got to be aware other cultures are not as likely as the West to have direct eye contact. But what always scares the hell out of me is when I get a guy in the car driving that is talking to me and thinks he's got to look me in the eye when he talks.
Right. And he's looking at you through the rear view, or worse, he's going like this.
And I've had them both, and you're absolutely right.
Yeah,
You've beat me to the punch on that, right?
Yeah.
He's looking in the rear view, which is great, but he's looking at me in the rear view, or worse yet, he's turning over and trying to talk.
Now think about what you just said. I mean, the driver talking is a distraction. It's a distraction because he's not doing his routine. In the security industry, I was always when I was trained, I was trained is if you're against the wall, you don't worry about your 6, right? You're 6.
Yeah.
So you work. Obviously, you're 12, you're 9, and you're 3. But when you're driving, you're doing the same thing. Think about it. And but again, if I'm having a conversation, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing, which is know my 360 field of view.
Exactly.
And don't think that your client doesn't notice it either, right?
Oh, they notice. They can feel it.
They notice it. And especially with these fucking phones, the text messages are dinging, right? So the driver automatically, now he doesn't realize it. He takes his eyes off the road and he's like, what did I just do that? 5 seconds, my 5 seconds.
Yep.
I was away from looking at the windshield.
How many football fields do you cover on the highway, right? Well, it's one of the things we train. And here's where it gets fun, right? Sometimes we are our own worst enemy in this industry, right? Because I can tell you when I've gotten picked up by someone who starts driving and then they go to their driver app and then they put that they're on, right? Now we're updating the driver app.
Updating the driver app to say I have customer in car.
Yeah. While they're right, instead of doing the normal routine, hey, just want to confirm where we're going. Would you like water? Update it, then get driving. Nope. He starts driving, then goes and updates it. Yeah. I immediately knew it was an IO because the phone rings and he picks it up.
Yep.
I'm en route. I've got him messing with the tablet. I've got him taking calls. And guess what? He's got to. That's a requirement of what he's doing for this trip. They got to know. Yep. He's just doing what he's been trained and taught to do.
Yep.
And so one of the things that we really focus on is you've got to train people to understand, look, it's tortoise and the hare. All right. Fast is slow, right? Slow is fast. If he gets in an accident, because he's updating the statuses, because he's not paying attention, if we get T-boned, we're toast.
What were you doing? What were you doing when the vehicle impacted is the question that's going to be asked.
Exactly. And someone brought this up on Facebook the other day, and it was one of those ones, look, I see a lot of things on Facebook where I go, I'm not touched that, but I jumped in, hey, I have a passenger get in the car. I'm in a huge hurry. I'd step on it. Well, what do we do? Well, what you don't do is speed and try to catch the light and drive any differently. What you do is you say, hey, I'm going to do everything I possibly can to get you there as quickly and safely as possible.
100%.
And then you drive safely and surely. Because guess what? Again, you get T-boned, you get pulled over, anything at all happens, they're not getting there at all. Now, you still want to make sure that you're cognizant of the fact that they're in a hurry and you treat them accordingly. But as you already said, Ken, you've got to understand that you've got to drive correctly. So what we train people is, you've got to manage all of these things through routine, and you've got to manage them through order of operations.
Muscle memory. It's got to become muscle memory.
Yep. When that person gets right, you've got them in the vehicle, you got everything loaded in, you're immediately going to then go through your typical spiel. And it's going to vary a little bit by company. Hey, excited to have you on board. I've got you going to the airport. It's about a 45-minute trip. Would you like something to drink? Would you like temperature? however your company does that, and it varies company to company. Then before you ever throw it and drive, update your app, set whatever you need to set, do whatever you need to do right then and there. Because even though for you, it feels like it took an eternity, it doesn't. It doesn't feel like an eternity in the back seat, because guess what? We all get in and drive. We all know that you don't just hop in and throw it and drive. You got to start the car. You got to do everything.
And I think you also have to get it in your mind that you are being judged by the
100%.
passenger. You are being judged by the passenger. It's not just James and Ken being hypersensitive when we take trips around the country. No. Every passenger is thinking the same thing. Harsh braking is I notice a lot. I notice the swerving. I notice all of that stuff. And we used to train that pretend that you have champagne glasses, a tier of champagne glasses in the back as you make your turns, as you're braking, etc. I don't know about you, but when I'm in the back seat, I'm hyper anxious about the car in front of us.
Yeah.
And there's also a perception that car in front of us is really a lot closer than it is.
Well, and I think one of the things that is easy to forget is that driving is something most people do or have done as a regular part of their life. And so it's a little bit like customer service. If I say to someone, explain to me what customer service is, they're going to struggle. I say, great. Explain to me what bad customer service is. They instantly think of a time where they're like, oh man, this guy, he was the worst. He treated me like crap. I hated it. He didn't respect me. Or, it's the same thing with driving. We don't have to be able to describe what's wrong to feel it. I can feel when you're in a situation where you're boxed in. I can feel, even if I'm in the back working on my laptop, if there's two semi trucks on either side of us, I'm going to feel claustrophobic.
Yep.
It doesn't matter, right? A little different for me because I do this for a living. But, you can have one of my kids in the back and they're going to know that something doesn't feel right. So you have to understand, and we teach, you have to really have a bubble. Your whole goal is to create a space around your vehicle and to do what you need to protect and maintain that space.
Yep. So what do you think of the drivers that give you a play-by-play? Oh my God, look at that lady in front of us. Oh my, let's get away from her. No. Yeah. Seamlessly. I don't want to know that we're in peril. I want you to manage the situation.
And we're playing chess, not checkers, right? That's one of my favorite sayings. If you've ever been on a webinar with me, if you've ever heard me talk, chess, not checkers. If it gets to that point, you screwed up. Because here's the thing. I can tell you right now, one of the big things, and this is a huge one for me, if I'm driving down the road and I'm in the right lane and I see a truck merging in, I'm going to make damn sure that I'm either one lane over, that I'm slowing down so there's room in front of him, or if I can without speeding or otherwise causing an issue, making sure that he's merging in behind me. Because here's the thing. In all of those situations, I'm worried he's going to merge into me. And again, I mentioned very cautiously speeding up. If he's merging in behind me, you better believe I'm looking a mile down the road, because the last thing I want is for him to merge in behind me. And anybody in New York, anybody in this part of the world, I'm talking to you, we all know in those areas, the last thing you want is him merging in behind you, traffic stops, and now I've got him trying to park on top of me. So you're having to manage that space directly around your vehicle.
So how much
and then
space?
Look all the way around.
How much space?
Look, I mentioned New York. In New York, it's going to be tough. In the ideal world, I want an empty lane on either side, and I want plenty of room in front and behind me.
What's plenty in front of me? 3-4 car lanes?
So it's going to depend on your vehicle. The bigger the vehicle, the more room you're going to need.
Go.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's funny because I want you guys to think everybody always expects to go and they always go, I know this. I learned it in driver's ed. It's a 3-second rule. And I go, okay, great. Till it rains, till it's foggy, till I'm driving a bus, right?
Yeah, you're driving. What's the motorcoach? 14,000 pounds or 28,000 pounds? I forget.
It's going to depend on what you're loaded with, and it's going to depend on your weight.
Right.
But the motor coaches are going to be very heavy and they're going to stop very slowly. But the other thing that you have to keep in mind, and I tell people, the distance that you keep on everyday driving, unless you're used to keeping a bigger gap, look, we're recommending 4 to 5 seconds, even in a sedan.
Right.
Now, you should never in a sedan have less than 3.
Right.
How
do you count? How do I know that I've got 3 to 5 seconds in front of me? How do I do it?
Well, and here's 2 things. So the seconds, if you've never done it, this is super easy. You wait for something to go by and you start counting. So I'd say, all right, look, I've got a sign up ahead.
Mile
I'm
marker
going to start
sign.
counting. Mile, 1, 2, 3. If I get to it, I stop counting. Once I actually get there, I stop counting. Now, here's the thing, and this is what I hear all the time from the guys, especially LA, East Coast, lots of traffic. James, are you nuts? With traffic, do you know how long it would take me to try and do that? Do you know how often that means slowing down? Do you know what that means in terms of opening up space? I get it. But here's the thing. If you don't maintain that space, if you don't defend that space, when you do have to stop or guy in front of you stops short,
you're in trouble.
You're in trouble. And we are now seeing across the country, there's been an increase in fraud. Now, this is where operators, telematics cameras, but we're seeing an increase of people that have figured out I can cut in front of a commercial vehicle, slam the brakes, make him hit me, and I have a claim.
No shit. There you go.
Guess what?
Yeah.
You probably have at least $1.5 million of insurance. And if you're running buses, you got $5 million.
Yeah.
So I know I'm not going to work for a while. And that goes back to the nuclear verdicts, to the insurance. Guys, they think we're lottery tickets.
And again, it's the straight line between the insurance premium increase to managing the expectations of your drivers. The other night somebody said, well, what do you mean by creating a culture of safety? Okay. To me, it's like creating a lifestyle of healthy eating.
Yeah.
Okay. This is what I'm going to avoid. And this is the activity I'm going to do. Right. So talk to me about the telematics systems, because, I've helped a couple of operators from a strategic consulting perspective, put some job descriptions in place and work. One of them was a safety manager and a DOT compliance officer. And I learned a little bit about Samsara. I was unbelievably, they're not a sponsor, but by the way, they should be paying to be.
Samsara, call us.
Right. Samsara, call us.
Salcon, call us.
Yep. Third outreach. So talk to me about the AI functions of these telematics and what it means and how an operator can use it to change the behavior of his drivers.
So let's take a higher level approach first, because I want to frame it, because a lot of people think that they're being proactive by having cameras and telematics.
They are, but you don't do anything about it. If you look at them, there's nothing proactive about it.
Well, and here's the thing. Anything that records an event cannot be proactive in preventing it. Okay. Look, I am a firm supporter of telematics. If you don't have Salcon, if you don't have Samsara, if you don't have one of the other vendors, right, Raven camera, whatever you're using, if you don't have those in the vehicle, you are at a massive disadvantage.
Yep.
Because you have to understand the proactive range and the reactive range. I live squarely on the proactive side. My goal at PAX, is that you never get an alert. You never have to deal with anything. You never have to say that was a close call, because you never know about it. We're training to prevent things from ever happening. You then have your reactive side. And I tell people, I live in the practice range. If we looked at this as a high-end sports team, I live in the practice range. This is the practicing. This is the training. This is getting ready for the game. Your Salcon, your Raven, your Samsara, your telematics, that is your post-game review. That is your video of the game. That's what actually happened out there. Now, what's really cool, and to tie this into your question about AI, is it used to be that they were really kind of looking for static items. Hey, we know that the speed limit here is 80 and the guy was doing 90, right? That typically happens when no one's in the car. In real life, the speed limit here is 55, he's doing 65. All of these different things were kind of static. Now that we have AI, we're able to actually go in and say, hey, where's the driver's eyes? You know, if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm looking you straight in the camera, but the camera can tell that now I'm looking off at something else, right? I'm over here, I'm leaning, I'm trying to talk to this passenger. Boom, distracted driving alert. It knows, hey, there's harsh driving. There's all these different things that it can now take all of the data and extrapolate it where you'd have a manual review before and you'd have to actually go through and find it. The big thing though, and Ken, you've already identified this, even as a reactive tool, it's not a tool if you don't use it.
Yep.
So if you're not addressing these alerts, if you're not actually looking at what's going on, now suddenly doesn't apply anymore. I'm getting the alerts. I'm not doing anything with it. And by the way, let's bring this back to insurance because it's always about insurance right now. If they find out in court after an accident, hey, you had a driver that he hit someone because he was following too closely. Oh, by the way, your telematics had alerted you time and time and time again that this driver was engaging in this repeated behavior.
Yep.
That magic word that those evil attorneys that come against us love to use.
And they all are.
Negligence, right?
Yep,
by the way, my sister-in-law is an attorney, but she's on the right side of things. But then you get that beautiful word negligence because you knew it was a problem. You wanted to make profits. You wanted to make money. You put money over people and you let that unsafe driver stay on the road. Guys that got you on the ropes, you're done. And that's what they're looking to do. So the goal of all of these systems, the goal of this is it's telling you what it's seeing. It's identifying these behaviors so that you can fix them.
So you can change the behavior in advance of a problem.
Chess, not checkers.
Yeah. And this is a perfect analogy, very quick one. I used to drive Derek Jeter. I think I've told the story before, and he used to get to spring training 2.5 hours before. And one day I watched him in the downstairs batting cage, and the pitching, the hitting coach was there. Now Jeter was the captain of the team. Okay. And the hitting coach is there, and he's listening. Derek, look at this video and look at what's happening to your swing. Something's going on here. Okay. So you're talking about a guy that's the captain of the team who could easily say, I don't need to come in for batting practice. Right. So what do you do for the operator who says, well, I don't need to do that. All my guys are great drivers.
Well, if I could help him, I help him. Unfortunately, otherwise I got to sit and wait for life to wake him up. Because here's the thing. I don't care what level of sports it is. It's all built on fundamentals. Look, I started playing hockey last October. I've been very lucky in that I'm surrounded by coaches that are great. That one of the coaches, all-time scoring record. One of the other coaches, right, grew up in Canada, grew up playing it. And the thing that they come back to over and over and over is the fundamentals, the core fundamentals, because everything is built on it. Jeter gets it. He understands that, hey, even though I might be amazing at this, two incredible things happen with people. One, learning's not an upward trend where you just learn and you go and you get amazing. Usually we get a hiccup. You get to a point where you amass enough knowledge that you kind of get that uncertainty, wavering. I've kind of got it all, but now it's kind of more mixed up than it was before, and there's a dip. And then we go up, and then you hit a plateau, right? And Jeter probably understood that plateau better than anyone, because what happens with drivers is companies want to say, well, I trained him, been driving since 16. I trained him how to drive, and now he's at the plateau. Well, if we wait for them to dip down to push them back up, now all we're doing is we're either performing at base level and then falling below it and pushing back up. All you're ever doing is performing at base or dropping below.
See, I think it's also more fundamental than that. I mean, Tom Mazur, God rest his soul. Yeah. He was one of my consultants when I first started in the limo business. I believed in consulting. I hired Tommy, and I never used to tell my people Tommy was coming in, right? And they still didn't know who he was. So Tommy would stay in Tampa. We would pick him up from the airport, take him to the hotel, and then we would have another driver take him from the hotel to the office the next day. And he would say his biggest thing when he did the training is, Ken, most chauffeurs don't know that they're bad drivers. They judge not being a good driver by, well, I haven't had an accident in 7 years. And he used to say, geez, odds are you're going to have one. Right. So think about what I just said. And the measure of most operators before this insurance crisis was, well, my loss runs aren't bad at all. We haven't had an accident in X.
Right.
I mean, think about that logic.
But look, and there'll be a whole nother podcast episode on a lot of these topics. But I think one of the things is the kiss of death to a safety program. And I mean this, I'm dead serious. The kiss of death to a safety program is when someone comes in and says, hey, we haven't had an accident forever. We're spending too much money on this. Let's save some money. Let's cut some cost.
Yeah, they think see what you just said? They think it's a cost instead of an investment. And okay, that's I got an operator that makes more money than God. Okay, he's been on our program for many times, and this guy makes a lot of money. And he basically said to me, you know what, my guys are spending too much time on Samsara. I said, there's no such thing.
Look,
there's no such thing.
Look, if you get our highest level membership, it's $9 a month. If you have over 100 drivers, you then start getting into volume pricing. You start automatically getting discounts applied to that amount, right? All the way up to a 25% off on that $9 a month. And I have operators all the time that come to me and they say, well, I would do that, but I just don't know that I want to spend $9 a month on that driver.
I don't want another recurring expense.
Yeah.
You're the same guy that's going to complain when your insurance goes up 35%.
You're worse.
Yeah.
One accident.
Yeah.
One accident will wipe out the cost of every driver over the course of several years. And the other thing, it's really funny because we've got this mindset that we don't think about it in the right frame of mind. I love this example. I used to give it all the time. I said, let me ask you something. If I could give your driver a Red Bull and it was a magical Red Bull that for a whole month would help keep their mind on what they're doing, help keep them doing the right things, help keep them amped up, help try and get you better reviews, help try and prevent accidents, would you buy him that Red Bull? I said, oh yeah. I said, if it was a Starbucks coffee, a little more expensive, but just one a month, would you do that? Well, yeah. But what happens is when we start thinking about scale, we say, well, $9 a month times my number of drivers times this, we haven't had an accident in a while. Look, I'm not telling people you don't have to use packs. You don't have to come and give me 9. And that's at the high end, right? We've got lower end options. But the point that I'm trying to make is that this is really hard as an owner because nobody looks and says, hey, this is how I make my money. The money wants to go into sales. The money wants to go into more trips. The money wants to go into vehicles. The money wants to go into these places. But in our industry, we found this commoditization of the driver or the chauffeur, however you refer to them internally, whatever type of work you're doing. There's this commoditization and this thought of, well, if I buy a vehicle, I'm going to have that vehicle. Even if the person driving it doesn't work out, even if I've got 2 or 3 people that drive it, I've got them there. But when you look at the cost you're spending every month on a lease, on a payment, however you're doing it, the question becomes, why do we have this mentality that the person operating it is not where to put the money?
Right. And something, it's funny. This is a good analogy. So Burns Steakhouse down in Tampa, right? They have a like a 6-month training program for their waiters and waitresses. That's absolutely incredible. Been that way for years. And it's extraordinarily detailed. So they had somebody come in and look at the cost structure of the steakhouse. First of all, it's one of the most profitable steakhouses in the country, right? But somebody walks through the door and says, you know what, I think you ought to change this, and you ought to maybe make it only a week or 2 week of shadowing a waiter or waitress. You know what the owner of Burns Steakhouse said, right?
I'm hoping he said get out.
Yeah, right. So it's investing. To me, it's an investment, and to me, it's an internal insurance policy, right? So I also believe that safety sells. Okay. I think that we're all trying to get a shrinking piece, a piece of a pie that's shrinking, which is the corporate account, the corporate client, right? Well, I don't care if it's corporate, it's hospitality, whatever. And there's competition everywhere. To me, when you walk through the door with statistics and you walk through the door and you say, listen, this is my telematics management system. This is how I manage my business. These are the statistics. I have PAX training. All of my people have gone through PAX training, and this is why your executives are safe with us, right?
Absolutely.
It's truly an investment. So let me ask you a question. So
Yeah.
break down the top distracted driving that the chauffeurs that you see the chauffeurs doing or the CDLs doing, and then what should they be watching out for on the road?
So a couple things in our world. One of the easiest things to avoid, and this is kind of distracted driving, but it's really its own item, is following too closely. If you ever get in an accident for following too closely, that is typically the easiest to avoid. And the excuse that I typically hear is, well, man, you don't drive out here on the East Coast, or you're not out there. You don't know how much traffic we have, guys.
Well,
look,
Jesus,
I drive it.
Traffic is everywhere.
Traffic's everywhere. And look, I travel the country, and sometimes I'm riding with a chauffeur, or I'm riding on a motorcoach. Other times, guess what, guys? I'm in this business. I love to drive. It's my favorite thing to do. So it doesn't matter if they give me a 4Runner or a Mustang. I'm going to go grab a car and I'm going to drive. When I come out to New York, I'm nuts. I like to drive. So I drive in New York. And because I'm nuts, I fly into LaGuardia and I drive over to Newark. So it's not like I'm not doing that. Same thing in LA. Guess what? I might be down by LAX. I might be up by Ontario. I might be down in San Diego. So it doesn't matter where you're driving. The thing there is the distracted driving piece. The biggest thing there is losing control of that space. Now, sometimes that becomes, hey, I let being a little tired distract me from defending that space.
Good point.
I let my phone distract me. By the way, CDL drivers, it's worse for you because it is literally texting and driving is illegal for everybody, but phone use for us is illegal too.
Right.
If you're holding that phone up,
right,
it's illegal. You've broken the law.
Right.
Now, and most states, guess what? Most states now are moving to making that a law for all drivers.
Yep.
It's one touch or Bluetooth. And
yep.
Owners, guess what? Unless there's an emergency, unless there's an issue, you should make it a policy that they're not taking calls when they're driving, whether that vehicle's empty, whether it's with passengers. I might have told this story on here before, but there was a horrible accident in Florida. And what happened is you had a bus driver who was distracted by a phone call. Everything's legal. No laws broken with the phone call. One touch, Bluetooth, just on a phone call. No, she's not supposed to be on a call, but she's on the call. And there's a guy that was a former gangster, had gotten his life back together, had married a nurse, had the dream life. Well, he ran out of gas. And for some reason, it possessed him to try and push this SUV down the highway. What happens? This distracted driver hits and kills him with his wife and 2 kids in the car. The thing that is burned into my mind to the point where even in my personal life, you know what? Call me later. I'm driving. I won't answer. It's burned into my mind because the photo I saw was the shoe on the top of the back of a 45-foot bus, right? His shoe up on the top of that bus. So you've got to keep in mind the number one thing that is the distraction right now in our world is devices.
And it's not just the device in the hands. You just described something that's sensory, right? Because they were on the call. Chances are they may have even been looking in front of them, but they didn't realize it because their brain was focused on the phone
cognitive
call.
Distraction. Yeah. And I don't want to go super crazy with this, but there's different types of distraction that you deal with. Yep. And so in that case, you had someone whose eyes were on the phone, or I'm sorry, their eyes are on the road, their brain is on the phone, and their hands are on the wheel. So they're physically engaged in driving, but they're cognitively unengaged. And so you have all these different types of distractions.
And you've got a missile going about 70 miles an hour.
And you got a giant missile going 70 miles an hour. Exactly.
So let's back up a step and talk about the operator that knows they should do this, that doesn't, right? The same operator knows they should look at their financial statements, but for some reason doesn't.
But we're going to help that person.
We're going to help that person later.
We're going to help you.
That's another episode. So what do you do for the operator that checks the box and has the Samsara or has whatever the telematics system is, but does not have a system in place to review it and then change the behavior in a positive way? What's the advice that you give them?
So most importantly, I'm going to break your mindset of box checking. It is not a box to check. It is a way that you run your company.
It's a culture of safety, or it's not.
It's not. Yeah, it either is or it isn't. And if you ask me what we do, and I am absolutely notorious for anytime PAX does anything at all, customer service never comes before safety. You ask us what we do: safety, defensive driving, and customer service. Why? Because you can't give customer service if I've literally peed my pants in the back of the car because we've had 5 near misses.
Yeah, it was knuckle drive. It was a white knuckle trip. Yeah.
Look, here's the thing. If I got to change my shorts when I get to the airport, it's one thing. If I'm going to a business meeting and it's the biggest meeting of my life and I've literally crapped my pants on the way there because this guy has terrified me, I'm not going to use you ever again, and I'm going to lose the deal.
No offense too. I mean, anxiety is a big thing, right?
It is.
And a lot of anxiety is because the person feels that they've lost control, and the passenger is giving you their ultimate control. The ultimate control is their life. So, so the operator who doesn't like to be confrontational and says, I'm not going to deal with that because Jesus, I don't want to go through another hiring phase. How do you deal with that guy?
So a couple things. So first and foremost, and maybe this will come up when we do an episode on pricing. I know that's something that you're going to talk with us about, Ken.
Yep.
First and foremost, understand that this is an investment. I mentioned earlier, the kiss of death to any safety or training program is when you say, we haven't had any accidents, we can scale back. No, if you haven't had any accidents, you don't change a darn thing.
Actually, I think you double down.
You absolutely double
because
down.
the odds are that you gotta almost wait a minute, it's too quiet around here.
Yeah,
right.
And that's what you want, because this is operationally part of that. Now, remember what I talked about earlier. When people plateau, you've got this plateau and then they dip back down. What's a much safer way to operate is you're pushing people up on the plateau instead of down. And anytime someone comes down, we try to push them back above that and keep top performers.
So how do you do that when Samsara or another telematics says, okay, we've had 5 episodes of distracted driving with Ken? What's the process?
So first and foremost, don't let it get to 5. Second, go back and review what's happening in your company. So if you find that you're having an issue multiple times, this keeps coming up, don't play checkers. Don't just go, well, I'm going to address one at a time. Play chess. Think 4, 5, 6 moves ahead and say, hey, something is fundamentally wrong in my training, or something's fundamentally wrong in my safety program. Look, guys, this is just like sports. Anybody that grew up playing sports, this should be second nature to you. Because here's the thing. The game, that's driving. That's game day. Game day is driving. And they're just game after game after game after game. Your telematics, your cameras, that's your review. The problem is we get in this cycle where we never go back to practice. Think about it. Think if after winning the Super Bowl, the coach came out and said, guys, we are so good. From now on, we only practice once a year. I'm going to bring everybody in. I'm going to give them a big pep talk, and we're going to go continue to win Super Bowls.
It's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
The same is true here.
At that level, they all understand that it is the continuous drive to improve that keeps them winning. And a lot of operators don't get that in any function.
No.
In any function, right? I said this last week in a speech. Well, I'm profitable, therefore I don't need to manage my financials. Oh, wait a minute. We haven't had an accident, therefore I don't have to jazz up my safety program. Okay. Comfort, complacency, and omniscient thinking, to me, are the worst things that you can have as an operator. You've got to operate at a heightened level of safety at all times, because otherwise, you're no different than the Uber or Lyft driver that's taking your business.
I'm going to share a story, right? I knew of an operator that had an accident, and they had an accident with a couple in the car, and he couldn't afford to lose the driver. So he put that same couple in the car with that same driver, a week, whatever.
The driver was negligent. The driver was.
The driver's in an accident. I don't care if he was negligent. For God's sake, don't put, unless I ask you to, why would you put me back in the car with the same guy? Not only that, why would there be a time frame where that guy's right back in? That guy's right back in with that
Good
same
point.
passenger. Look, I don't care if it wasn't his fault. I don't care what the situation was. If you haven't lost me as a customer, unless I'm saying, hey, no, it totally not, I'm fine with it. Why would you put me back with that person? Our whole world, everything we do in passenger transportation, our goal is to create this feeling that they are safe, that they are taken care of. Every need is there. That's why in our world, it's not just driving safety and defensive driving. PAX has always been about building a core of safety and building a core of service. You can only get to service once you have the safety in place. Now think about it, whether it was his fault or not, regardless of what happened, what am I immediately going to think about the next time I get in the vehicle with that driver?
It's gonna be immediately on.
It's going to be in my mind.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what happened. It's on my mind, right?
Yeah.
And unless I said, hey, that was my guy, I want that driver, unless I'm requesting it, don't put me back in the vehicle with them.
And I think that's almost like you have no concept of what you put these people through. That's number one. And number two, I think in general, our industry, we are so busy working in the business, not on it, and trying to get people from point A to point B, because especially on our busiest days, that we're not proactive. We're almost, we think we don't have time to be proactive.
Right.
And I argue that the reason why you're on this hamster wheel is you haven't taken time out to think it. Why is this continually happening? Why are people hitting cars in the parking lot? You know, you brought up something the other day or earlier that it's not necessarily the catastrophic accident, but it's the scuffed bumpers, the fenders,
Yep.
the dinged rim that's $1,000 to fix, and you're like, why is continually happening? And my answer is because you haven't backed up and you haven't looked at why. You don't have a proactive process in place to manage the data that you have. And a guy said to me the other day, well, you know, telematics, I look at it if I've had an accident, or I have a problem. I said, there is so much data that you can manage your business by, that's proactive, and that you can use it as a sales tool, but use it to build up the muscle memory of your company. And it kind of is very concerning that they don't draw that direct correlation. They're like, well, the 30% price increase has nothing to do with me because I haven't had an accident.
But you used a magic word. You brought up something really magical that a lot of business owners miss, and that can be really tough to see through the weeds. And that's process. Here's the thing. You need processes and systems. And guess what? I can tell you right now, I hear people all the time say, hey, we could develop our own program. We can develop our own training materials. We can develop our own everything. We can do all of this.
Of course you can. Yeah.
And I can make my own iPhone.
Right.
You know, I can go find engineers.
Right.
We can figure out the technology. Why do we have this thought of we'll do? And here's what happens to most business owners. You have that thought of we'll do it. At absolute best, you half cock that gun. You kind of sort of throw some stuff at it and you call it good. One of the things that I learned as an entrepreneur from my father-in-law, who I was lucky enough to be mentored by, right? He's got a multi-million-dollar business, doing well, doing great. He said, look, it didn't start there. When I was little, I had to figure out what to do. But why would I try to invent the wheel when it already exists?
Why would I reinvent the wheel? There's no question about it.
Why am I going to try and build and do something? Guys, look at this in this way. You have to figure out what it is that you produce at your company. And for almost all of us, we're not making the SUV. We're not making the motorcoach. We're not making the Sprinter. Our big thing is you are making drivers that provide experiences. So instead of trying to figure out exactly what it is, how do I keep them safe? How do I do this? How do I teach them driving safety, customer service? Grab these tools off the shelf. Go put in a telematics company. Use a company like PAX to help you do the training. And then you focus on developing them into the type of person that you want to drive your family, that when passengers ride with them, they go, I have never felt so great. But you're doing that by putting all of these pieces together. If you spend your time figuring out how to actually create the hammer, you're never going to drive the nail.
Without question. And again, to me, pull it off the shelf because it's there. Use it to improve your business, and then spend your time and energy working on your business, not in your business.
In your business.
You know,
Absolutely.
it's like a guy says to me, I said to him, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm doing my books. I said, wait a minute. You're doing your books. It's 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. This is prime selling time. This is the reason why your revenue is actually shrinking.
Revenue generating time.
Right. Because it's not a good use of your time. Okay. And to me, it's not a good use of your time to try to recreate the wheel. To me, it's easier to get it off the shelf. If you want to enhance it, that's fine. But it was interesting to me, the undertone in the room at Neela shifted. It shifted away from the problem being the insurance companies to understanding that the operator plays an active role. There's a guy up there that talked about the telematics system and the AI functions, and him contacting the drivers, the chauffeurs, when there was no customer in the car, and say, listen, we're getting this signal. You really need to drive the vehicle the same way when you have the chauffeur in the car, or empty. And that's the biggest thing. And so I saw the operators getting more collaborative on it, and an understanding that in order to fix the problem, they had to identify the symptoms and they had to change and treat the symptoms. I'll leave you with this. When I look at bad reviews of companies, do you know the most prevalent bad review I have?
Which one?
That driver cut me off.
Yeah.
The driver cut me off. Your driver was speeding and he cut me off. I want you to think about that. That person gave a review of the business. They're not even a customer.
Yep.
Okay. And how could that have been prevented?
Yep.
The guy was speeding down the highway, and of course the logo is on the vehicle. We want that, right?
You're a billboard.
Right. So what is the person is so upset that they got cut off that they give you a shitty review? Okay, so obviously I'm looking at a company that's got 5 or 7 of those really bad. They're racing their people between transfers. That's number one. They're racing them between transfers, right? And they're not doing what you said, which is understand that you've got this bubble around you, and they're not using the data. To me, when I look at a review that says the driver was speeding, right, driving reckless driving, he's not even a customer, and they're observing that.
Well, and here's what I want to close on, because you're hitting on something, and this it's a little similar to what you said a second ago with your telematics. When you get a telematics alert, one of two things is going to happen. You're going to go review it and you're going to find out it's legitimate, or you're going to review it and you're going to find out it wasn't legitimate or wasn't an issue. And you're going to document if it wasn't legitimate. If it is legitimate,
you're going to document the change in how you change the behavior.
Not exactly. Not only that, right? One of the things you should be doing is, and I get people that call me all the time, hey, I had this situation. What's the exact right course to have them take? Because you want to go in and say, hey, I've done a remedial training. And in PAX, that's easy. In our world, that's I assigned him the course, or I had him retake the course, or I gave him this piece of that additional training. And then I spoke with him, and you're going to document that. And then you're going to make sure that if that happens again, you are being careful to not allow patterns of behavior to develop. Because remember what I said earlier, the problem becomes if you have a guy that, hey, I've talked to this guy 10 times for speeding. Dude, the lawyer's going to go in and he's going to go, he knows it's a problem. He doesn't care, because we only care about money. That's always it's going to come back to. And the other piece of that is, guys, there's no silver bullet. Insurance is going to go up.
It's never going to change.
It's across the board.
The market is never going to become a soft market. You need to understand that it's going to be a hard market, and it's going to continue to go up and up and up. So that's going to lead us to pricing at some point.
But I have good news, and you're absolutely right, Ken. If you guys don't listen to the pricing episode after you listen to this episode, you're in trouble. But here's the thing. When the pricing goes up, you don't have to ride the ride all the way to the top. Look, their job at the insurance company is to assess how much of a risk you pose. That's what underwriting's whole job is.
100%.
Underwriting's job is to come in and say, okay, Timmy's Limo, John's Motor Coach Company, Steven's Taxi, whatever company you have, they come in and they say, okay, we have to try and figure out how risky you are and how likely you are to blow it. Because if you have a huge accident, if something goes horribly wrong, we know what the worst case scenario is, but what do we kind of expect? What do we think is going to happen? So if you're actually creating a safety culture and you're documenting it all before you do your insurance renewal, months before, you should be getting an insurance packet ready. Here's all the training that we've done in the past year.
Build the case.
Build your case.
Build the case that you're less risky.
You're being graded. You're being assessed because they have to assess the risk. Now, does that mean you're going to get the most favorable, best pricing in the world? No. Insurance is also a regulated industry.
What do you say to the operator that says, well, I'm really good friends with the broker. He'll take care of me.
Okay. Well, let me ask you something. Are you giving the broker what they need to get the job done? Because if I hire a chef and I say, hey, he comes to my house and his name is Tommy and I've known him since we were kids and he's the best chef in the world, and he gets to my house and there's nothing in my fridge and there's nothing for him to cook, how is he going to take care of me?
He can't tell the story anymore because there's not enough companies out there, right? There's not enough companies out there where he can pass you from one company to another, and he can't tell the story without data.
And to that point, your goal, you should not be, if you're looking at insurance as price alone, guys, there's more to it than that. We at PAX have a partnership with Lancer. If you're a Lancer customer, if you're one of their insurance, can't say enough about Steven, Tim, that whole team. But if you're a Lancer insured, you get access to additional Lancer specific training.
Yep.
Lancer, the way they approach claims, the way they do things is different. Every insurance company is a little different. There are things you're going to get with Lancer that you might not get with a National Interstate, or you might not get with a Carolina Casualty, or there's things with Carolina Casualty you might not get with a Lancer.
Correct.
They each have their own thing. So if you're assessing it purely on insurance, right? Purely on my cost, two things. Their job is to assess your risk. If they know you're looking for the cheapest deal, that tells them you're a cheapest deal person.
Yeah, and you might be more risky because you're also going to be cheap on your safety. You're going to be cheap on your DOT regs.
Because you're just a cheap
on everything.
guy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
by the way, it's usually because you don't make your pricing properly and you don't make enough profit. That's why you have to be cheap, because your profits suck.
And here's the thing, guys. You've gotta make sure that you understand the game that you're playing. To Ken's point about he's my broker, is taking care of me. Give him the tools to do the job right. Set him up for success. Look, we have a company that we work with out on the East Coast. Had him come to me this year and say, hey, for the first time ever, we've had no incidents last year. And we know that it's because we're doing weekly training through PAX. We're keeping it top of mind. They have two main things that they think about every single week. How am I going to stay safe, and how am I going to create an experience for this passenger? That's what they're focused on. That's the bread and butter of the passenger transportation industry.
And you know the funny part about those
push
companies?
them up.
You know the funny part of those companies? They understand that success is fleeting. They understand that success is temporary, right? So what they do is they develop systems of excellence. And it's not just lip service. It's internal processes and systems of excellence. And it's funny how the ones with the best safety programs are also the most profitable. They're also the ones that
have the best systems.
They have the best systems, and they also have the best insurance rates year after year. Okay. It's funny how that is. It's funny how the ones that do everything reactive, they do everything last minute, they really are not in touch with all of the levers of their business. And I say to them, I don't know why you're surprised that your rates went up 35%. You're doing the bare minimum on safety. You're doing the bare minimum on driver training. Your mindset is a sense of plentiful. I can go and get insurance anywhere. I don't have to change things. Nope. It's out of my hands. No, it's not.
This shows up time and time and time and time again all throughout business. And this is what I'll leave you guys with. When you have a vehicle that you start getting a small noise from, do you wait for it to be so loud you can't ignore it, or for your lights to show up as a Christmas tree, or do you immediately take care of the problem? More importantly, don't you want a safety program just like you'd want in your maintenance program that never has the squeak, because you are identifying it and taking care of it before it ever became an issue?
You're
Because guess what
proactive.
happens? Yep. Issues turn into problems. Problems turn into accidents. Accidents turn into catastrophes. Wouldn't you rather never have issues? So
And there
I think
you go.
that's the best place to leave off.
I think it's absolutely a great place to leave off. I love these episodes. We've been on the road for a couple of weeks, but another successful episode, guys. We will see you back here again soon. And the next subject is going to be pricing.
Pricing. How do you afford this?
By the way, we've got some great stuff coming up. We got Charlie Horkey coming up, right?
Yep.
Charlie Horkey from Slade Services, one of the most, iconic operators, been around this business for 40 years. To me, one of the fathers of the livery industry. And then we've got one of my favorite people in the entire world, and one of the most positive guys in the entire world, Eric Coolbaugh from Advantage Remarketing, is coming up. So stay tuned, guys, and thanks for listening.
Take it easy, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Ground Transportation Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe to the show on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about PAX Training and to contact James, go to paxtraining.com. And for more information about driving transactions and to contact Ken, go to drivingtransactions.com. We'll see you next time on the Ground Transportation Podcast.